Page 7. Attitude. Once a young man visited his friend. The host welcomed him and offered him tea. The young man looked at the cup of tea and threw it out of the window. When the host saw this, he asked his friend, "Why did you throw the tea?" The young man replied, "There was a fly in the tea." The host was very embarrassed. He apologized and served another cup of tea. The young man looked at the tea and again threw out of the window. On inquiring, the young man gave the same reply. "There is a fly in the tea." Now the host served tea for the third time. Once again the young man threw the tea out and gave the same reason. "There is a fly in the tea." The host closely observed the young man and replied, "Please remove your spectacles and see for yourself. The fly is on your spectacles and not in the tea." Moral. Many a times we are faced with a situation as this and we put the blame on others for our own problems. Due to stress on the job and the demand of time, people vent out their anger and frustration on others, little realizing that they themselves are responsible for their own problems and unhappiness. We can change our life greatly by changing our own thinking and habits. Page 8. Three Brothers. Once upon a time, three brothers left their own farm to work in the city. They were all hired by the same company at the same pay. 3 years later, Jim was being paid 5,000 rupees a month, Frank was being paid 10,000 rupees, but George was now making 15,000 rupees. Their father was curious to know about the difference in their salaries and visited the smart employer who said, "I will let the boys explain for themselves." Jim was summoned to the supervisor's office and was told, "Jim, I understand the Far East importers have just brought in a large transport plane loaded with Japanese imported goods. Will you please go over to the airport and get a cargo inventory?" 3 minutes later, Jim returned to the office. "The cargo has 1,000 bolts of Japanese silk." Jim reported, "I got the information over the phone from a member of the crew." When Jim left, Frank, who was paid 10,000 rupees a month, was called. Frank, said the supervisor, "I wish you to go to the airport and get an inventory of the cargo plane which was just brought in by Far East importers." An hour later, Frank was back in the office with a list showing that the plane carried 1,000 bolts of Japanese silk, 500 transistor radios, and 1,000 hand-painted bamboo trays. George, who was paid 15,000 rupees a month, was also given identical instructions. Working hours were over when he finally returned. The transport plane carried 1,000 bolts of Japanese silk. He began, "It was on sale at $60 a bolt, so I took a 2-day option on the whole lot. I have emailed designers at different places offering the silk at 7,500 rupees per roll and expect to have orders tomorrow. I also found 500 CD players which I sold over the telephone at a profit of 500 rupees each. There were 1,000 bamboo trays, but they were of poor quality, so I didn't try to do anything with them." When George left the office, the employer smiled. "You probably noticed," he said, "that Jim doesn't do what he's told. Frank does only what he was told. But George works with enthusiasm and more than what is expected. The future is full of promise for one who shows the initiative." Page 9. Quotable quotes. "No one is brilliant from birth, but it is their hard work which makes them brilliant and lucky." Opportunities are usually disguised as hard work, so most people don't even recognize them. Let us strive for an excellent hour each day. An excellent life is the sum of many excellent moments. Page 10. Ego. Here is the story of a brilliant scientist. After a lot of practice and efforts, he developed a formula and learned the art of producing a clone of himself. He did it so perfectly that it was impossible to tell the reproduction from the original. One day while doing his research, he heard that the angel of death was searching for him. In order to remain alive, he produced a dozen clones of himself. The reproduction was so good that all of them looked exactly like him. Now when the angel of death visited him, the scientist stood with the clones. The angel of death was confused as to who amongst the 13 before him was the original scientist. He left them and returned to heaven, but not for long. As an expert in human nature, the angel came up with a clever idea. He addressed to the scientists present in this crowd of 13 people, "Sir, you must be a genius to have such perfect reproduction formula of yourself. However, I have discovered a flaw in your work. Just one tiny little flaw." The scientists amongst this crowd immediately jumped out and shouted, "Impossible! Where is the flaw?" "Right here," said the angel, as he picked up the scientist from among the reproductions and carried him off. The whole purpose of the scientist and his formula of reproduction failed, as he could not control his ego. So he lost his life. When man's knowledge and skill takes him to the top and makes him successful, the three-letter word ego can pull him down to earth immediately at its double speed. So don't allow your ego to kill you and your relations with others. Instead, kill your ego. Page 11. If God is to live in us, ego must leave us. We can alter our life by altering our ego. Ego has a giant appetite. The more we feed it, the hungrier it gets. A man, while walking on the bridge, suddenly realized that it was shaking. He prayed for help and saw God on the other side of the bridge. He asked God to help, but God did not respond. The man was angry and with great difficulty crossed the bridge and saw God holding the broken edges of the bridge. Trust God. God's ways are amazing. Page 12. Where does it end? A wealthy farmer was once offered all the land he could walk on in a day, but he must return before sundown to the point at which he started. Without wasting time, he started early next morning and started covering ground quickly because he wanted to get as much land as he could before sundown. Even though he was tired, he kept going all afternoon because he didn't want to lose this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to gain more wealth. Late in the afternoon, he remembered the condition he had to fulfill. He started his return journey, keeping an eye on how close he was to sundown. The closer it got to sundown, he pushed himself beyond the point of endurance, and he collapsed just when he was inches away from the starting point and died. He was buried, and all the land he needed was a small plot. How much land does a man need? Quotable quotes. Peace is more precious than a piece of land. Greed is like seawater. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. Seek joy in what we give and not in what we get. The true character and culture of a person is revealed if we come to know how he reacts when someone disagrees with him or when someone tells no to his request or demand. Page 13. Root out. A wealthy man requested an old scholar to guide his son in overcoming his bad habits. The scholar took the youth for a stroll through a garden. Stopping suddenly, he asked the boy to pull out a tiny plant growing there. The youth held the plant between his thumb and forefinger and pulled it out. The old man then asked him to pull out a slightly bigger plant. The youth pulled hard and the plant came out, roots and all. "Now pull out that one," said the old man, pointing to a bush. The boy had to use all his strength to pull it out. "Now take this one out," said the old man, indicating a guava tree. The youth grasped the trunk and tried to pull it out, but it wouldn't budge. "It's impossible," said the boy, panting. "So it is with bad habits," said the sage. "When they are young, it's easy to pull them out, but when they take hold, they cannot be uprooted." The session with the old man changed the boy's life. Don't wait for bad habits to grow on you. Drop them while you have control over them, or else they will get control over you. Page 14. Friends. When we meet our friends, we hug them and ask them with love and enthusiasm, "How are you, buddy?" What do we do when we meet our parents in the morning? Do we seek their blessings or hug them or talk with love? We converse endlessly with enthusiasm with our friends. When our parents talk to us or discuss something, our reply is short, and when they discuss a little further, there is irritation in our voice and we tend to cut them off. We chat on the internet with our friends for an unlimited period of time. Do we sit and talk with love and enthusiasm with our parents, even for 10 minutes a day? Only when we need something, we talk to them. When we are not well, they are worried and make every effort to help us feel comfortable and bounce back to good health. They nurture us with lots of love and patience. When our parents are not well, do we have time to give them company and make sure that they are comfortable and need any help?